The massive structure appeared silently at the edge of the solar system, drifting like a cloud of metallic dust catching the distant sunlight. At first, Earth's deep space monitoring stations thought it was a sensor malfunction. No known astronomical phenomenon could create such a perfect formation of objects. Deep in the Kuiper Belt monitoring station, Controller Mark Peters rubbed his tired eyes and double-checked the readings. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but the data on his screen demanded his complete attention. What had started as a routine night shift had suddenly become the most important moment in human history. "Control, this is Peters. You need to see this," he called over the secure channel. "I'm tracking what appears to be. Well, I'm not exactly sure what I'm tracking." Within minutes, the station's primary observation room was filled with bleary-eyed scientists and military personnel. The main screen showed thousands of objects, perfectly arranged in a formation that could only be artificial. They were moving, or rather drifting, at a relatively slow speed compared to typical celestial objects. "Those are ships," said Dr. Robert Hayes, the station's lead astronomer. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent room, everyone heard him clearly. "Those are definitely ships." The next few hours were a blur of activity. As news spread through official channels, the world's major space agencies scrambled to gather more data. The formation consisted of over 3,000 vessels of varying sizes, from massive city-sized ships to smaller craft that could have fit inside a football stadium. But something was wrong. The fleet's movement pattern was erratic, showing no signs of powered flight. Instead, they were being pulled along by momentum alone, like a collection of dead ships in an ocean current. Then came the signal. It was weak, barely detectable above the background radiation of space, but its pattern was unmistakably artificial. The world's best code breakers and linguists worked around the clock to decipher it. After 36 hours of non-stop work, they had their answer. It was a distress call. Captain Tom Miller stood at attention in front of the Emergency Response Council, a hastily assembled group of military leaders and civilian experts from various nations. The massive screen behind him showed the latest images of the alien fleet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "we are looking at approximately 300,000 alien refugees in ships that are, for all practical purposes, dead in space. Their primary power systems have failed, and they're running on emergency reserves only." The room erupted in murmurs. Captain Miller waited for them to quiet down before continuing. "Based on the decoded transmissions, they call themselves the Bright Ones. Their ships use some form of quantum drive technology that has completely failed in our region of space. They're trapped, and their life support systems are running out." "How much time do they have?" asked the Chinese representative. 3 weeks at most," Miller replied. "After that, the emergency systems will fail, and we'll be looking at the largest mass casualty event in known history." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity had just made first contact with an alien civilization, only to find them on the brink of disaster. Their response to this crisis would define human civilization in the eyes of the galaxy. "Captain Miller," the council chairman spoke, "you've been selected to lead this rescue operation. What do you need?" Miller straightened his shoulders. "Everything we've got, sir. Every ship that can fly, every engineer who can think outside the box, and every bit of cooperation we can muster between nations. We're about to attempt the largest rescue operation in human history." As the council members discussed the logistics, Miller looked at the screen showing the stranded fleet. Somewhere out there, hundreds of thousands of beings were watching Earth, hoping that this young, seemingly primitive species would find a way to help them. "We'll save them," he whispered to himself. "We'll show them what humans can do." Outside the conference room, the wheels were already in motion. Humanity was about to prove that sometimes the simplest solutions could solve the most complex problems, and that being technologically advanced wasn't always the same as being clever. The rescue mission was about to begin. The Situation Room at International Space Command buzzed with activity as engineers and scientists pored over the data streaming in from the stranded alien fleet. Holographic displays showed the massive ships tumbling slowly through space, their once proud forms now dark and lifeless except for the faint emergency lights that pulsed within. "The problem is bigger than we thought." Bill Cooper, the lead engineer, pointed to a complex diagram floating in the center of the room. "Their quantum drive technology operates on principles we barely understand. It's like trying to repair a fusion reactor with stone tools." Captain Miller leaned forward, studying the readouts. The alien vessel's power systems were completely dead, with only auxiliary power keeping the life support running. But what troubled him most was the steady decline in those backup systems. "Show me the life support readings again," he requested. The hologram shifted, displaying a downward curve that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. At the current rate of decay, the environmental systems would fail in less than 3 weeks. 300,000 lives hung in the balance, counting down with each passing minute. A message flashed across the main screen. They had established visual contact with the alien leadership. The room fell silent as the feed activated, revealing their first clear look at the Bright Ones. True to their name, they glowed with a soft, bioluminescent light that pulsed gently as they spoke. The alien leader's skin shifted through shades of blue as it explained their situation through the hastily assembled translation system. "Our people fled from the destruction of our home systems." The translation came through in a neutral voice. "We thought we had calculated a safe passage through this region of space. We were wrong." The alien's light dimmed noticeably. "Something about your sector of the galaxy interferes with our quantum drive technology. All attempts to restart the systems have failed. We are dying." Miller stepped forward. "We understand your situation, and we're preparing a rescue operation. But we need to know more about your ship's systems." The next hour was a crash course in alien technology that left most of the human engineers shaking their heads in disbelief. The Bright One's technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best achievements, and that was exactly the problem. "Their systems are too advanced," Cooper explained after the transmission ended. "They've eliminated all the inefficient backup systems we would normally use. When their main drive failed, everything failed." Outside the command center, the world was mobilizing. Shipyards that hadn't seen activity since the decline of ocean shipping were suddenly buzzing with workers. Space agencies worldwide were launching every available rocket to get eyes on the situation. But not everyone was happy about the rescue effort. Protests erupted in major cities, with signs demanding "Earth first" and "Don't waste our resources." The costs of the rescue operation were mounting by the hour, and some nations were already threatening to pull their support. In orbit, the first human ships to reach the alien fleet transmitted back images that made the crisis even more real. The massive vessels were clearly designed for aesthetic beauty, as much as function, their graceful lines now marred by dark, lifeless sections. "They're not just ships," reported Commander Jane Foster from her observation position. "They're entire cities. I can see parks, buildings, what look like schools. These people brought their whole civilization with them." The Bright One ships had been designed to be perfectly efficient, with every system integrated into a seamless whole. But that perfect efficiency had become their downfall. When one critical system failed, it took everything else with it. Miller stood at the window of the space station, watching Earth rotate below while the reports continued to pour in. They had the greatest collection of human minds working on the problem, but time was running out. The aliens' technology was simply too advanced for humanity's current capabilities to repair. Maybe, he thought, looking at the latest efficiency report, that's not the answer we need to be looking for. As if to punctuate his thoughts, another alarm sounded. One of the smaller alien ships had just lost its backup power, its lights flickering out like a candle in the wind. They had just lost their first ship, and with it, the lives of everyone aboard. The race against time had begun in earnest, and humanity needed to find a solution fast, not with advanced technology, but with the kind of innovative thinking that had kept their species alive through countless crises on Earth. They didn't need to match the aliens' technology. They needed to think differently. The emergency conference room fell silent as Jack Wilson stepped up to the podium. The retired mechanic from Montana looked out of place among the assembled scientists and military leaders, his weathered hands and oil-stained jacket standing in stark contrast to the pristine uniforms and lab coats around him. "You all are thinking too complicated," he said, his voice rough but confident. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." The room stirred with murmurs of discontent. They had spent days trying to understand the aliens' quantum drive technology, and here was a mechanic telling them they were overthinking it. Jack pulled up a simple diagram on the main screen. "Look, we can't fix their fancy drives. But we don't need to. We just need to move them. And I've been moving stuck vehicles my whole life." He pointed to his sketch, a crude drawing of what looked like a massive tow truck in space. "We take our biggest ships, strap some chemical rockets to them, and pull. Simple as that." The laughter that followed died quickly when Captain Miller raised his hand for silence. "Explain more, Mr. Wilson." "These aliens, they went all in on their quantum whatever. But we humans, we never put all our eggs in one basket. We've got chemical rockets, ion engines, solar sails. Hell, we've got ships that can run on just about anything. Sure, they're not as fancy as quantum drives, but they work." Dr. Cooper, who had been skeptical at first, was now quickly sketching calculations on his tablet. The thrust requirements would be enormous. "But it's not impossible. We'd need to modify the attachment points, design some sort of coupling system." A message interrupted them. The aliens were requesting an update on rescue plans. Captain Miller made a decision. "Show them," he ordered. When Jack's primitive-looking diagram appeared on the alien leaders' screens, their bioluminescence flickered in what the translators interpreted as disbelief and possibly amusement. "You propose to tower ships with chemical propulsion." The alien leader's skin pulsed with skepticism. "Such technology is centuries behind our current level of advancement." "Yes," Miller replied simply. "And that's exactly why it will work." Over the next hours, Jack and the engineering team refined the concept. They would start with a proof of concept, a modified oil tanker retrofitted with space-grade rockets, attempting to move one of the smaller alien vessels. The modifications took 3 days of non-stop work. The converted tanker, renamed Pioneer, looked like something from a child's drawing. All awkward angles and hastily welded supports. But it was ready. The world watched as Pioneer approached its target, a small alien ship about the size of a cruise liner. The coupling procedure was tense, with the human crew having to improvise as they attached the towing mechanisms to the alien hull. "Connection secure," reported Pioneer's captain. "Beginning thrust test in 3, 2, 1. The chemical rockets ignited, their flame invisible in the vacuum of space, but their effect unmistakable. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the combined mass of both ships began to move. In the alien command ship, the bright ones watched in astonishment as their sensors confirmed what they were seeing. Their vessel was moving under controlled power for the first time since entering this region of space. "Impossible," one of their scientists muttered, their skin glowing bright with excitement. "They're actually doing it with primitive chemical propulsion." Back on Earth, Jack Wilson watched the feed with a quiet smile. "Sometimes," he said to no one in particular, "you don't need the fanciest tools. You just need to know how to use what you've got." The success of Pioneer proved the concept, but it also showed the enormous scale of what lay ahead. They would need hundreds of ships, thousands of rockets, and more raw materials than any single nation could provide. But they had proven something crucial. Humanity's primitive technology could save these advanced aliens. As the news spread, ships began arriving from ports worldwide. Oil tankers, cargo vessels, cruise ships, anything that could be converted was being offered up. The greatest salvage operation in human history was about to begin, powered not by quantum physics, but by good old-fashioned rocket fuel and human ingenuity. The aliens were about to learn that sometimes moving forward meant taking a step back. The port of Shanghai had never seen anything like it. Dozens of massive ships lined the docks, their hulls being cut open and reinforced with space-grade materials. Welders worked around the clock, their sparks lighting up the night sky as they transformed ocean vessels into spacecraft. Similar scenes played out in ports across the globe. In Rotterdam, Dubai, Singapore, and Los Angeles, the world's shipping fleet was undergoing the most ambitious modification program in history. It's like building a space program from scratch in 2 weeks, Professor Anna Smith observed from her makeshift command center in Houston. Her team had developed the synchronization system that would allow multiple ships to tow in formation, a feat that had never been attempted before. The professor watched as her simulation ran again. On the screen, a network of 20 ships worked in perfect harmony to move a massive alien vessel. In reality, getting human crews to coordinate at that level would be far more challenging. The math works, she explained to Captain Miller during their daily briefing. But we'll need perfect coordination between all ships. One mistake in the formation could tear the whole fleet apart. The captain nodded grimly. They had already lost too many alien lives to delays. Every hour meant more failing life support systems aboard the refugee ships. In orbit, the first wave of converted vessels was beginning to arrive. They looked like something from a fever dream. Ocean-going ships wrapped in thermal shielding, their bows bristling with rocket engines, their sterns modified with massive grip mechanisms designed to latch onto alien hull materials. Commander Rick Thomas stood on the bridge of the converted oil tanker Endeavour, still adjusting to the strange sensation of zero gravity in what had once been a seagoing vessel. "Helm, take us in slowly," he ordered. "Let's show these aliens what a bunch of sailors can do in space." The Endeavour moved carefully towards its designated alien ship, its crew a mixture of experienced astronauts and merchant marine officers. They had trained for this mission in simulators, but the real thing was infinitely more complex. On Earth, former rival nations were sharing resources and technology like never before. Chinese rockets were being mounted on American ships, Russian engineering teams were working alongside European crews, and Middle Eastern oil companies were donating entire fleets to the cause. "We're receiving another transmission from the Alien Command," an operator announced in Houston Control. The bright ones had been watching the human effort with increasing amazement. Their skin glowed with complex patterns as they observed these supposedly primitive beings accomplishing what their advanced civilization had thought impossible. "Your species continues to surprise us," the alien leader's translated voice came through. "We had not considered that multiple ships could work in conjunction this way." Professor Smith allowed herself a small smile. "That's because you've been thinking in terms of efficiency. We humans learned long ago that redundancy isn't always a weakness." The rescue fleet continued to grow. 200 ships had been converted, with more joining every day. Each one had to be modified, tested, and certified for space operations, a process that would normally take years compressed into days. But problems kept arising. The first full-scale test of the synchronization system revealed dangerous harmonics in the towing formation. 3 ships were damaged, forcing quick modifications to the entire fleet. "We need more time," Professor Smith argued during an emergency meeting. "Time is the one thing we don't have," Captain Miller responded, pointing to the latest statistics. More alien ships were losing power every hour. The decision was made to launch the operation with the ships they had, ready or not. The risks were enormous, but the cost of waiting was even higher. As the final preparations were made, Commander Thomas addressed his crew aboard the Endeavour. "What we're about to do has never been done before. We're going to save lives using nothing but human stubbornness, some rockets, and a whole lot of hope. Make our species proud." The makeshift rescue fleet moved into position, their formation spreading out among the stranded alien ships like a web of hope. They were about to attempt the impossible, not with quantum technology or advanced AI, but with converted cargo ships and the determination of their crews. Humanity's greatest salvage operation was about to begin. The first connection was the hardest. Commander Thomas watched through the reinforced viewport as Endeavour's magnetic clamps locked onto the alien hull with a dull thud that resonated through the ship's structure. "Contact confirmed," his engineer reported, reading solid grip on all points. Across the vast expanse of space, 200 other converted Earth vessels were performing the same delicate dance. Each human ship had to match velocity perfectly with its alien counterpart, establish a secure connection, and prepare for synchronized thrust. In Houston, Professor Smith's hands flew across her control panel as she monitored the forming rescue grid. "Formation Alpha is at 60% completion," she announced. "We're seeing some drift in sections 3 and 7. The bright ones observed the operation from their command ship, their skin pulsing with a mixture of anxiety and fascination. They had never seen such a seemingly chaotic approach to space operations, where their own ships would have moved with perfect precision. The human vessels adjusted and readjusted, compensating for each other's movements in an almost organic way. "Remarkable," one of their scientists commented. "They're adapting to each other's movements in real time, like a living organism." The next phase was even more critical. Once all ships were connected, they would need to fire their engines in perfect sequence to avoid tearing the fragile alien vessels apart. "All ships, this is Control," Captain Miller's voice carried across the comm system. "Prepare for first stage thrust on my mark." In the silence of space, 200 chemical rockets ignited simultaneously. The massive formation shuddered as the forces distributed through the network of ships. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the whole operation might fail. "We're seeing dangerous stress levels in Sector 4, Professor Smith called out. "Compensating." The human crews reacted instinctively, adjusting their thrust vectors and redistributing the load across the formation. Slowly, steadily, the massive fleet of combined ships began to move. Commander Thomas felt a bead of sweat roll down his forehead despite the climate-controlled bridge. "Status report. We're showing stable movement," his navigator replied. "Current velocity is increasing at projected rates. The alien vessel is holding together." Inside the alien ships, the bright ones were experiencing something entirely new. Their own technology had always been perfectly smooth and efficient. This human method was rough, full of minor corrections and adjustments, but it was working. Cultural exchange began almost immediately. As the human crews maintained their positions, they started communicating with the aliens they were rescuing. The bright ones were fascinated by human concepts like seat of the pants flying and making it up as we go along. "You mean you don't have a precise mathematical model for every possible scenario?" one alien asked during a communication with Endeavour. Commander Thomas laughed. "If we waited for perfect solutions, we'd never get anything done. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and adapt." The journey was far from smooth. Multiple times, ships had to adjust their formations to deal with unexpected complications. When one vessel's engines began to fail, 3 others immediately adjusted their thrust to compensate, maintaining the delicate balance without missing a beat. Professor Smith watched the data streams with growing pride. Her synchronization system wasn't working exactly as designed. It was working better. The human crews were using it as a guideline rather than a strict protocol, adding their own experience and judgment to create something more flexible and resilient than any computer model could have predicted. "They're learning from us," the alien leader observed to Captain Miller during one of their regular updates. Their skin glowed with a new pattern that the translators interpreted as respectful amazement. "We had forgotten that imperfection can be a form of strength." The massive convoy continued its slow journey toward Earth orbit. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but it was working. Humanity's primitive technology, combined with their ability to adapt and improvise, was accomplishing what advanced alien engineering could not. As they passed the orbit of Mars, Commander Thomas made a brief entry in his log. Day 15 of rescue operations. The aliens are beginning to understand that sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes, it's the one that simply works. The warning alarms blared across every ship in the rescue fleet simultaneously. On Endeavour's bridge, Commander Thomas felt his heart skip as the readings flashed red across his screens. Major stress fracture developing in the primary towing array. His engineer shouted, "The whole grid is becoming unstable." The massive network of ships shuddered as the carefully maintained formation began to break down. 200 vessels, each connected to a precious cargo of alien lives, were suddenly in danger of tearing themselves and their charges apart. In Houston, Professor Smith's synchronization displays erupted in chaos. "We're losing cohesion in multiple sectors. The stress is cascading through the entire system." The problem was devastating in its simplicity. The connection points between human and alien ships were failing. The constant strain of towing had weakened the structures faster than anyone had anticipated. "All ships, cut power immediately," Captain Miller ordered through the command channel. But even as the engines died, the momentum of thousands of vessels threatened to tear the fleet apart. Commander Thomas made a split-second decision. "We need to get out there and reinforce those connection points manually. Prepare for emergency EVA." The Bright Ones watched in horror as human crew members began exiting their ships into open space. To them, it seemed like madness. Sending fragile organic beings out into the void to attempt repairs while the fleet was still in motion. "Your people will die," the alien leader protested through the emergency channel. "The forces involved are too unpredictable." But humanity had centuries of experience working in impossible conditions. From oil rig welders to high-rise construction workers, humans had always found ways to repair things that weren't meant to be repaired. Thomas led his team out into space, magnetic boots clanking against the hull as they made their way to the failing connection points. The void around them was filled with other space-suited figures, all racing against time to prevent disaster. "Look at how they move," one of the alien scientists observed, their skin pulsing with amazement. Each human is adapting to the changing conditions independently, yet somehow maintaining coordination with the others. The repairs were unlike anything taught in space training. Crews used emergency welding gear, high-strength cables, and in some cases, parts cannibalized from their own ships to reinforce the failing connections. "This is like trying to patch a tire while the car is still moving," one astronaut quipped over the comm, drawing nervous laughter from others. Professor Smith watched the sensor readings anxiously. "The stress patterns are stabilizing. They're actually doing it." But they weren't out of danger yet. A secondary connection point ruptured, sending dangerous debris spinning through the repair zones. 2 human crew members were struck, their tether lines snapping. Without hesitation, other repair teams abandoned their tasks to rescue their stranded colleagues, demonstrating the human priority of life over mission. To the Bright Ones, who had always valued mathematical efficiency above all, this seeming chaos of changing priorities was a revelation. Each human can make independent decisions, the alien leader realized, yet they maintain their larger purpose. It's beautiful in its own way. After 6 grueling hours of spacewalks, emergency repairs, and countless near disasters, the fleet stabilized. The human crews had reinforced every major connection point with a combination of proper repairs and improvised solutions that would have horrified any engineering professor. "Status report," Captain Miller called out, his voice hoarse from hours of coordinating the emergency response. "The grid is holding," Professor Smith confirmed. "It's not pretty, but it's stronger than before. The repairs should last until we reach Earth orbit." Commander Thomas, finally back aboard Endeavour, looked out at the patchwork of repairs now visible across the fleet. Cables, welded plates, and improvised braces created a web of human ingenuity between the ships. "Sometimes the strongest fixes are the ugly ones," he said to his crew, "because they're born from necessity rather than theory." The Bright Ones had learned a crucial lesson. Their own technology, for all its advancement, had become so specialized that it couldn't adapt to unexpected situations. Humans, with their inefficient redundancies and ability to improvise, had turned near disaster into triumph. The rescue fleet resumed its journey toward Earth, now bound together not just by mechanical connections, but by the shared experience of facing and overcoming crisis together. Earth filled the view screens as the massive combined fleet approached its final destination. After weeks of careful maneuvering, close calls, and constant adjustments, humanity's greatest rescue mission was nearing completion. Commander Thomas stood on Endeavour's bridge, watching as the first alien ships were carefully guided into stable orbits. The sight was breathtaking. Hundreds of massive vessels, their elegant forms now adorned with human-made repairs and modifications, glinting in Earth's sunlight. Final approach vectors are locked, his navigator reported. We're bringing them home. In Houston, Professor Smith's team coordinated the complex orbital dance. Earth's space stations have been modified and expanded in record time to accommodate the refugee fleet. The professor watched as her screen showed green status indicators across the board. I never thought I'd see Earth's orbit this crowded, she remarked to Captain Miller. It's like we've suddenly become a proper spacefaring civilization. The Bright One's command ship was the last to be positioned. As it settled into its designated orbit, the alien leader requested a direct communication with Earth's United Command. Their skin glowing with complex patterns of gratitude and respect, the alien leader addressed the assembled human representatives. Your species has done the impossible. You saved not just our lives, but our entire civilization, using technology we had dismissed as primitive. The alien's glow shifted to a deeper hue. We offer you not just our thanks, but a proposal. Let us share our advanced technology with humanity. You have shown us that we still have much to learn from each other. The implications were staggering. The Bright One's technology, even with its limitations, was centuries ahead of human capabilities. But they weren't just offering technology. They were offering partnership. Your species has qualities we had forgotten were valuable, the alien continued. Adaptability, redundancy, the ability to improvise. These are traits we engineered out of our civilization in our pursuit of perfect efficiency. In orbit, the work continued. Human crews helped the aliens establish temporary habitats, while longer-term solutions were developed. The sight of space-suited humans working alongside the glowing forms of the Bright Ones became common. On Earth, the impact was immediate and profound. The story of how humanity had saved an advanced alien civilization using primitive technology spread across the globe. It became a symbol of human ingenuity and determination. Commander Thomas found himself giving a tour of Endeavour to a group of alien engineers. They were fascinated by the seemingly crude but effective modifications that had allowed an ocean vessel to become a space-worthy rescue craft. Your ship's systems are inefficient by our standards, one alien observed, their skin pulsing with curiosity. But that inefficiency allowed you to adapt when circumstances changed. We had not considered this advantage. The knowledge exchange began immediately. The Bright Ones shared their understanding of quantum physics and advanced materials, while humans taught them about redundant systems and the value of maintaining primitive backup technologies. Sometimes the old ways are worth keeping, Thomas explained to his alien guests. Not because they're better, but because they give you options. In Houston, Professor Smith was already working with alien scientists to develop hybrid technologies that combine the best of both civilizations. Their first project, a new type of drive system that could operate in any region of space, using quantum principles but with chemical backup systems. Captain Miller stood in the observation dome of the International Space Station, watching Earth and the alien fleet orbit together. A Bright One floated beside him, their glow reflecting off the curved window. Your species has earned a remarkable reputation, the alien said. The story of how primitive humans saved an advanced civilization will be told throughout the galaxy. Miller smiled. Maybe it will remind everyone that advancement isn't just about technology. Sometimes it's about remembering the simple solutions that worked in the past. The galaxy had changed. Earth was no longer an isolated world of primitive humans. They had proved themselves to be resourceful, adaptable, and capable of achieving the impossible through sheer determination and ingenuity. As the sun rose over Earth's horizon, casting golden light across the combined fleet, it marked not just the end of a rescue mission, but the beginning of a new era for both civilizations. Together, they would forge a future that balanced advanced technology with practical wisdom, efficiency with adaptability, and progress with preservation of proven methods. The simple solution had turned out to be the best one after all.